the head of an Albanian criminal network and a senior state official discussing voter intimidation before the 2017 general election. A government official updating the Albanian Prime Minister on the tally of votes bought. A crime boss promising the ruling Socialist Party another electoral victory. A member of the Albanian mafia congratulating a minister on stellar election results. These were just the tip of the iceberg of a set of explosive wiretaps that sent Albania into political chaos.
When you hear these conversations, they sound like Italian mafia movies, where they decide who should rule the country, and therefore the country should be ruled by their people and not through fair and independent elections. This was explosive evidence showing that criminals not only they enjoy total impunity, but they are also part of government in the sense of helping and supporting the politicians, in this case socialists, to remain in power.
This illegal vote rigging by criminals was done with the cooperation of local officials and also high officials of the state, which makes it incredibly clear not just how our government functions, but also who is governing us. Never before have I seen criminal groups use such sophisticated tactics to influence the will of the electorate. And that's why I and my colleagues at Bern and VOA decided to investigate this phenomenon.
The story we published focused not only on the ties of these wiretaps between politicians and members of organized crime, but also the failure of the judicial system, the prosecutor's office, to properly investigate these leads. There is people who have been indicted, which were mostly low-level officials and members of organized crime. But the part which involved their ties to the local politicians and, let's say, the electoral fraud process, that has not been properly investigated.
The fact that Bern Albania, Voice of America, and later German newspaper Bild were the ones to break this story isn't surprising. These outlets received their funding from outside Albania, giving them the kind of editorial independence that allows them to cover issues most domestic news networks are reluctant to touch. Whilst Albania's media space has opened up significantly since the end of decades of dictatorship in the early 90s, Albanians can't exactly rely on their mainstream news networks for hard-hitting investigative reporting, especially when it comes to corruption and the intersection of politics and organized crime. When the wiretap story broke, there was a brief spurt of coverage initially. And then most of Albanian news outlets fell virtually silent.
One of the issues here in terms of media freedom is there is a climate of self-censorship amongst journalists. They get a job with a mainstream television station or a newspaper, and they know that their boss is linked to the government or owns a construction company that wants government permits or something like this. So they know that they have to tread carefully and follow a particular editorial line or stay away from certain stories because they know that their job could be gone like that.
When this was revealed by Voice of America and Bern Albania, I think for local media it's kind of easy to republish because this way they detach themselves from the content and they just say this is what has been reported. Even in this case, I think some of the media tried to downplay the importance of these revelations. However, when Bild started to publish similar wiretaps, then they didn't have a choice, right? They had to report this, otherwise, in the eyes of the public, it would be very clear that they are so pro-socialist that they are not even able to cover these explosive materials.
There are a few journalists who do continue to cover criminal groups and their relationships with politicians. But it's become a dangerous beat, and navigating the complexity of reporting in a country whose political system and even parts of its media industry are intertwined with organized crime means self-censorship is hardly journalists' biggest worry. One night in August last year, the house behind me, the family home of journalist Claudiana Lala, was sprayed with bullets. No one got hurt, but Lala, who's been reporting on the relationship between politics and organised crime for over a decade, says a clear message was sent that night to scare her into silence.
To be quite honest, I find it very difficult to speak about that incident because my family and I are trying to completely forget about it. I have tried to have a strong journalistic voice, to investigate and expose the links of organized crime to politics, and to denounce the power of criminal groups. While the authorities try to argue that this shooting was the result of some sort of family feud, I'm convinced that there is no other reason for my family to be targeted than my reporting. But the attack has had no effect at all professionally. I covered difficult stories before, and I will carry on doing this in the coming years.
We know very little about the people who committed those attacks because unfortunately there hasn't been a proper prosecution as the Prime Minister promised at the time. I think the political will from the political elite is missing. They're not supporting brave prosecutors and law enforcement officers to find who's responsible for this kind of acts because this can also lead to them. This is a kind of attacks against journalists who go unpunished, certainly would push more journalists towards self-censorship and not, act bravely and courageously as Claudiana Lala has done in her reporting.
The war against critical journalists isn't just waged with bullets. More often, it's waged with words. Threats, smear campaigns and online harassment have become the tools for those in power to fight dissenting voices. Alice Taylor is a Tirana-based journalist who earlier this year was the subject of a far-reaching smear campaign that she says was orchestrated by the government. This was a result, she says, of her critical coverage of the wiretaps and corruption in the ruling Socialist Party.
I made a comment to Russia Today, a factual comment on what had been happening with the political situation. And then suddenly my phone started going crazy and I started receiving messages from people sending me links. Pro-government media had started saying that I was a Russian spy. They published my photo, said that I was paid by Russia and or the opposition party to undermine democracy, that I was a traitor to the Albanian people. They then started publishing my partner's photo, saying that he was a wanted criminal and a violent militant. I mean, it spread like wildfire. I received abuse on the street as well, whilst being heavily pregnant. It got to the point where I didn't leave the house without someone with me.
Prime Minister Edi Rama has become very known internationally as someone who goes directly against every single journalist that he does not like. When you have a powerful person naming and shaming journalists, then of course for the public it's very easy when they meet a journalist to slap them and even to kill them. Before Jan Kuciak was killed in Bratislava, the former Prime Minister Robert Fico called journalists dirty Slovak prostitutes. Before Daphne Caruana Galizia was killed in Malta, the Prime Minister of Malta, Joseph Muscat, organized smear campaigns putting the picture of Daphne Caruana Galizia in billboards throughout the country. If we compare ourselves with them, we are not there, fortunately. However, there are indicators and there are practices where after these smear campaigns were organized, journalists were killed. So I would not be surprised, unfortunately, if something like this happens in Albania.